Hello there, Commonwealth Realm here. One of the least talked about aspects of the upcoming sequel to Breath of the Wild is the freedom of exploration, or more specifically, the gameplay of the open-air surface and the far more linear sky. Plus striking a balance of these two when it comes to the controls and gameplay of the identical run, jump, fight, glide, and likely climb gameplay, which is back, and will hopefully also be joined by underwater swimming now that we can pretty much swim through rock-hard stone. I mean, after we fight our way with our new multifunctional arm and fire out of the Zonai underground, where Princess Zelda fell even deeper down.
Did somebody say Zonai and underground? Ah, wait, it is Conrad of Commonwealth Realm, and this is your part of the collaboration. Excellent. Just remember that the underground gameplay after the opening of the sequel is my domain. Here, however, as the title suggests, we will explore the gameplay and exploration of the altered, reused surface of Breath of the Wild with its not fully used Zonai locations and the new Sky Realm/Sky Islands, the latter two of possible Zonai origin.
Indeed, so be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to both of our channels with notification bells on, and let's get up into the surface that Link will emerge into after being attacked by Malice, losing his Master Sword, awakening with a new arm from the distant past, and fighting his way out of the darkness. To replicate this moment from Breath of the Wild, or even when we first entered Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time, or Clocktown in Majora's Mask. From underground to the open world, and later sky, inside Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. So here we are back to the surface, waters and air that we have explored for hundreds of hours in Breath of the Wild. Is that it? An expansion to Breath of the Wild? No, since the world is different in so many ways. First and foremost, it is far more dangerous, since as we exit the underground, we are likely to witness a cutscene that, much like the raising of the first Sheikah Tower of the Great Plateau after Link being resurrected in Breath of the Wild, will give us the rising of Hyrule Castle by the resurrected Ganondorf. A cutscene that establishes our goal, to confront the source behind the calamity, and which has now replaced the puppet, and also is preventing us from storming the castle right away. And that means that it will not be as easy to get high-level loot and weapons within the first hours of the game. And this is by many ways the far greatest gameplay change of the open-air surface of Hyrule by far. So there will be no more 30-minute or so speedruns to reach the credits of the game. Instead, we're in for a far more linear and mandatory story-driven quest, but with plenty of open-air freedom, just as we saw in the multiple gameplay scenes of the E3 2021 teaser.
Despite record levels of malice, it seems that large parts of Hyrule are unaffected by Ganondorf's return to power, with one notable exception, namely the return of his legions and monsters who were vanquished by Link with the destruction of the Calamity and with it the Blood Moon. Now we are dealing with the true culprit of everything we fought against in Breath of the Wild, and he will not allow himself to be reached easily again. He may no longer have his corrupted ancient Sheikah guardians by his side, but instead a combination of his forces and stronger forms of the basic enemies he unleashed over the last 100 years, and for us players since 2017. Well, 2016 if you were lucky enough to B-press at E3 2016 and play the demo.
Glad you mentioned the Guardians and Sheikah tech and structures in general, as beside the elevated floating castle, akin from Ganon's castle in Ocarina of Time, the absence of anything ancient Sheikah is the second most notable change to the open air of Hyrule, and thus the gameplay of the sequel after the change of the end goal, Hyrule Castle. Just think of it. No Sheikah towers to climb or glide from, no Sheikah guardians to fight, no Sheikah shrines to explore, no tech labs as the flames are out and not coming back, changing fundamentally the gameplay of the game, since no Sheikah tech means no province map to download, no ancient weaponry like ancient arrows, and no underground box trials with treasure as part of these. No spirit orbs, and no Sheikah monks, as they have all dissolved with perhaps the exception of Monk Master Kashia. Also, there will be no Master Cycle 0. Simply put, nothing ancient Sheikah, including the Sheikah Slate, which runes are being replaced with distant past handy abilities. Technology is dead again in Zelda, and its likely Zonai replacement, though filled with green spiritual sorcery, will be far more organic, much like the rest of the world surrounding us. So simply put, the surface will be more organic or spiritual, and instead of emphasizing on wisdom, focus will be on courage and its battle against the power of evil. That being combined enemies, stronger returning enemies, new monster enemies, and probably far more that the Zelda team is yet to reveal on the path to the planned release in 2022.
No doubt, Ganondorf's strength and malice is far stronger and more reaching than it ever was in Breath of the Wild and its paid DLC. Previously safe locations and easy enemy encounters will become far more menacing for Link and likely also challenging for us the player. This makes sense as Breath of the Wild 2 is much like Majora's Mask, a direct sequel where we play the same Link on the same system. Thus, the Zelda team expects that you already know the open world of Hyrule because this is a far greater challenge, all aimed to make you return to post-apocalyptic Hyrule and the path to become a true hero into a malice-infested hell. With enemy camps on top of mini-bosses, new malice-covered locations, and for the first time likely outside of central Hyrule and Sheikah Towers. Malice was a very interesting gameplay concept as it hurt Link, but was only fully implemented in and surrounding Hyrule Castle and a few enemy camps. This is where things might change. Malice everywhere. A hazard that, to a much greater degree, limits our exploration in certain areas. All to make us feel uncomfortable and different from the gameplay and territory that we have mastered since 2017.
And how will we counter it? From the air, obviously, with our new paraglider and aerial combat from this one, for our new arm and its powers of light, which might or might not be related to the Triforce of Courage. And also, of course, new ground-based weaponry that will help us once again grow. Why? As we will no doubt have our health reduced after combining with the mysterious green arm and also being attacked by Malice and falling unconscious due to both. We'll have to build our stamina and health once again, either by reusing the goddess statues found in the settlements and temples scattered around Hyrule or somewhere else. But wait, will the surface not be very boring and even more empty with our Sheikah structures? Yes, but actually not, since the teaser hinted at something with these teardrops, our Sheikah shrine replacement, but instead of going underground to complete trials, we're going up to the sky, and here I want to bring up a significant point. Remember the Sheikah shrine quests? Well, it is likely that we'll get far more of these in order to get up to the sky when new trials await, along with brand new side quests found at the stables and the settlements scattered around Hyrule, and of course, great minigames.
Though before we depart for the islands in the sky, we need to go to the areas that were underused in Breath of the Wild, but which hold so much potential for the sequel. No, I am not only talking about all the bodies of water that need to have their last barrier of no underwater gameplay removed, but also Eastern Hyrule. Specifically the provinces of Faron and Akkala. Two massive provinces with rich history, but little to no main quest objectives. Akkala had one memory at the Spring of Power, while Faron had none. At the same time, Faron was littered with a civilization built on stone that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. The Zonai, an abbreviation of Nozai, the Japanese word for mystery. A militaristic, dark sorcery-wielding tribe of the jungle which, at some point, was likely oppressed by the Hylians, who called them barbarians. Much like what the ancient Romans called all non-Latin and Greek foes. The name King Rome Bosphoramus Hyrule was no coincidence, as with a little historic background we get King Rome Bosphorus Hyrule, or in true Roman terms, Rome Constantinople Hyrule, the capitals of the two Roman empires, ancient and medieval. The former barbarians and their possible descendants in Lurelin will likely rise in prominence, as that will add a new purpose to the open world. But will it bring dungeons to the historic Zonai locations of open-air Hyrule, that being Zonai Ruins, Typhlo Ruins, and Thundra Plateau? Or will these never grow beyond the point of shrine quests in Breath of the Wild, meaning that dungeons in the sequel will be exclusively tied to the sky?
It could be the case, as the E3 2021 trailer clearly indicated that the Sky Islands will be reached from the surface, most likely through teardrop-like puddles like this one that sends us up to areas which contain puzzle and combat trials. Two forms of trials that we remember well from Breath of the Wild's ancient Sheikah shrines. It all feels rather similar. It In Breath of the Wild, we either locate a Sheikah shrine or complete a shrine quest to raise a shrine and head underground for an elevator lift. In the sequel, we locate a specific water puddle, which we'll likely touch with our fused right arm to be sent up to the sky, initially skydiving, much like in Skyward Sword. But instead of dropping to one of 3 provinces on the surface, we will land on what appears to be the first of a long list of sky islands. One that might be Skyloft, where the Legend of Zelda pretty much began in Skyward Sword, as the first Zelda in the timeline was born right here. And the first quest took place when Link went down to save his girl and became the first hero in the process. The sky and the gameplay of this one is thus poetic, and in many ways the opposite of what we witnessed in Skyward Sword, where locations of trials awaited on the surface before one final one where it all began in the sky. In Breath of the Wild sequel, it might be the opposite, where most of, if not all of the dungeons, will be located in this clearly Japanese-inspired realm with torii gates, leading into Shinto shrine-like areas, and in the distance, gliding, running, and perhaps even climbing to temples that we can see in the distance, taken straight out of Buddhism.
The spiritual path and journey of most Japanese, through a torii gate to Shinto shrines and its rituals as they get older and closer. Closer to what? The unavoidable end for all of us on this planet of mortals. And this is why so many elderly Japanese find hope in Buddhist temples. Reincarnation on this planet. In the sequel, it is more likely that we will follow a similar path. Passing through the gates, complete the rituals or trials along the way, like defeating this broomstick automaton, and then advance further, paragliding, running, and slicing our way to the temples in the distance. The likely dungeons of this game, with multiple levels and far more depth than any of the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild could ever offer. But with a mandatory linear quest line leading up to these, like in every 3D Zelda game, both past and present. The Sky Islands could be a reward that allows us to advance the plot after hours upon hours of exploration on the ground, a far longer experience than the 5 to 10 minute long Sheikah shrines, instead being an actual territory and loading area that we gradually traverse through to reach their main destination, the temples.
In Skyward Sword, director and writer Hidemaro Fujibayashi introduced the first step in an East Asian, or if you prefer Buddhist direction, for the Legend of Zelda. Then, the Kakariko, Yiga, and Ancient Sheikah were the next step in Breath, but its sequel might bring it to the next level. An extensive spiritual journey to become the first true hero of courage since the distant past, and face the true evil of power. And with temple exteriors like these, you can just imagine how the interiors will look, with a more traditional dungeon approach, which they reminded us exists in 3D Zelda through Skyward Sword HD. The Zelda team now knows our expectations when it comes to the sequel. We want proper Zelda dungeons with numerous enemies, puzzles, keys to unlock locked doors, mini-bosses, boss keys, and imposing, or at the very least unique bosses. A return to what never needed fixing, as Zelda was the best in the industry when it came to temple exploration and dungeon crawling. And if they manage to strike the balance between open world exploration and proper dungeon progression and challenges, then this game from a gameplay and visual perspective is likely to become one of, if not the best video game of all time.
Dungeons that continue the theme of combination found in the multi-layered tunic Link is wearing, weapons he wields, and foes he faces. A further evolution of the beloved Zelda formula, where Link stands triumphant after the bosses disappear and obtains a new heart container. Along with it, likely a new power to his right arm, or some other objective that will bring him closer back to the Master Sword and its appointment with Ganondorf. We may even, just like in Paper Mario, or more fittingly for this game, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, combine the gameplay of Link with another one. A character that remains in the darkness. Princess Zelda, who fell deep underground and will not accompany Link on the surface and in the sky. Much like Zelda in Skyward Sword, who went on an adventure of her own. An adventure and quest that we first saw on the left side of the credits of Skyward Sword. Now, over 10 years later, with the big theme of combinations in the Breath of the Wild sequel, the time might arrive as Link exits the first Sky Temple for more surface gameplay. Though instead of placing us back to continue our path through Hyrule, we cut over to playing deep underground, as the one who, for some reason, had her hair cut far shorter for the sequel. A character and gameplay study we will conduct in depth on my channel NintendoBlackCrisis, so be sure to click the thumbnail in the end card.
But before you head over, be sure to leave a like, subscribe with notification bell on to not miss any upcoming Zelda and Breath of the Wild 2 videos. Finally, a big thanks goes to all patreon.com/CommonRealm patrons, and in particular to royal producer Charles Shash, and obviously to NintendoBlackCrisis for joining. But now, be sure to check out his part of this collaboration on Princess Zelda's role and gameplay possibilities in at least sections of this 2022 sequel.